It's episode number 2 for the Commercial Property Investing Podcast Australia. I'm your co-host Arjun Paliwal, CEO at Investigate Buyers Agency. And I've got Chris Huckster, our head of commercial, as a co-host as well. Now, we are bringing the guests episode after episode, so you won't just get bored of me and Chris. You're going to hear some new voices, see some new faces, and really help you get your commercial property knowledge up, but also the insights that you're looking for. Now, today we speak to Allison from MMJ Real Estate based out in Victoria. They're a company across Australia who specialize in commercial property asset management, sales, and even some business advisory work across some of their locations. Now, Allison has a lot of in-depth experience. We're going to be talking about the DIY do-nots when it comes to commercial property investing, especially when it comes to managing and maintaining an asset. We're even going to deep dive into the city of Melbourne, where some areas of value are and what you can actually learn from that. And lastly, we're also going to unpack some super high value deals and how they came to life and what made them work well. And now I'm talking in the world of $30 million plus in deal sizes, just for you to get to see what happens in that world of commercial property investing. So let's unpack that in today's episode and speak to Allison from MMJ Real Estate. Allison, welcome to the Commercial Property Investing Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I was going through the introduction today, and the thing that just really hit me was your experience is some of the most in-depth and detailed experience across the world of asset management and commercial real estate that I've seen. And it was really special just to go back on that. But I think I'd love to give some of the listeners and watchers today more into your current role at MMJ and just how it all started for yourself.
Yeah, sure. I was the type of young adult that went straight to the property section of the newspaper. Every time I'd get the local newspaper, I'd be flicking over to the houses and planning how I was going to own one from the age of 12, I think it was. And so when it kind of came, when you're doing your career decisions in high school, and my biology teacher actually said to me, "Oh, have you thought about doing property?" And I went, well, property, great, okay. So I looked into the degree at RMIT, which is a business property degree, and thankfully, got the required score, get in there, and just fell in love with it throughout that process. Not only the property side, but the business side and everything like that as well. And as part of my third year in uni, we got to do work experience, and that was what led me to a scholarship position with Knight Frank, which took me through, in 10-week kind of intervals, sales, leasing, valuation, and property management. And so I did my last 10 weeks in property management, and I never left. I ended up doing 3 days a week in the city office and 2 days a week out in the suburban office, and then just eventually rolled into a property management role at Knight Frank. And I was, there for a good 5 years, specialising in what I would say was more industrial and high net worth individuals, and as well as our, mum and dad investors and things like that. So that was where I kind of started. And then from there, I did a 5-year stint there, and then I moved across to CBRE. And when I came across there, I was looking after our institutional clients. So I was the strategic leader for Charter Hall and GE and Valad Blackstone, few of the others along the way.
As prestigious it gets on the names, right?
Yeah.
Firstly, I think what I'd love to do is give a shout out to that biology teacher.
I know,
do you know what I mean?
I thought I was really good at biology. I thought I was going to get into biology.
Yeah. You're like, oh, something big's coming in the biology. What's she going to say to me, or he or she's going to say? But I mean, what I want to say is just side note. Doesn't that show the impact just people in that younger age of life, teachers especially, have an influence on you? And I think the 100%. Same can be said in our workplaces of what we do, your leaders.
Yeah.
Because the same way we'd spend more time at school than we would at home, today in our older life, we spend more time at work than we do at home too. So just your people around you, your leadership team, who you work with, the customers you have, all of that makes a big influence. And no doubt you can see from the names and the companies you worked for, lots of influence across there.
Yeah.
Allison, we've worked in the past together.
Yeah.
And first thing that I've noticed when working with you, obviously you're incredibly intelligent, very smart person. And when I come across people like you, and Arjun's the same, you could have done any industry, you could have done anything, and you would have excelled because that's who you are. But
Thanks for saying so.
but why specifically property management? Because you did valuations, you did other industries within property. What made property management tick for you?
Well, look, I think I got a really great opportunity to dip my toe in the water to sales and leasing and valuation. I had made a decision early in uni to go down a development and asset management path rather than valuation. And that came down to valuation being a more report-driven kind of sit at your desk, type away reports kind of role. And I'm a more people person. And I just thought that was probably not going to, fulfill me as much as another avenue would. And then I obviously went through sales and leasing, and I, to be fair, recognised it was a very male-dominated industry, particularly when I was, in third year uni. And I just saw that whilst I was still quite young, it's probably something that I would have had to have really fought for. And I went to property management and I just found my niche. It's like all things problem solving, strategy, looking after people, talking to both landlords, talking to tenants, and you're not stuck in the office every day. You get out, you get to see the properties that you're looking after. And so all round, it's like everything that I love being able to do, I guess. So, yeah.
The diversity.
And the fact that every day is different. You never know what you're going to get.
And what's really underrated on the property management and asset management side is, when people buy, it is a transaction. When people sell, it is a transaction. And look, we know that and we respect that. We try our best through that transaction to be more relationship-driven transactions. But in your world, it's all relationship. It's not any part of it is like there's no transaction piece to it all. It's like 100%. The long relationships, the building of relationships. That also must change like completely the way you operate, the way you react to situations, the way you problem solve. How do you feel that's shaped you as well in just terms of the way you work?
Yeah, and every good property manager needs to understand this at some point in their career, that we're a conduit, for the information. We're not making the decisions on behalf of the landlord. We're not making any decisions on behalf of the tenant. So we have to really carefully manage those relationships, particularly where their ideas are differing. So it actually helped me to shape the way in which we negotiate and communicate and adapt that to whichever situation that we're in, particularly if there is a difficult situation, maybe there's an argument about the rent or, there's a difficulty with maintenance or something like that. To be able to communicate effectively and keep everyone on side is something that, it takes experience, a lot of experience to be able to manage that from both sides. But when you get it, it actually impacts your life in general. Like, From my personal perspective, my husband and I would never fight because, we just always have a way of communicating, It's crazy.
Proper life skills, like transitional from work to life.
Yeah.
Rather than there's like this line that you end the work day or have this, the personal day, you know how to like take the skills from one and translate it to the other.
Yeah.
You carry your negotiations from the leasing aspect to your
Does that mean like he almost always loses every negotiation?
I probably wouldn't want to say that publicly, but no, boo. Happy wife, happy life, right?
How hard can a husband be? You're doing like 20, 10, $30 million plus deals. It's like, you got this on lock then, huh? So.
Allison, tell us about MMJ. You're at the helm of that agency, and you guys have recently, I've been scrolling LinkedIn and I'm seeing some massive things happen in your space, massive transactions, 20, 30 million plus.
Yeah.
You guys are really on the board there. So tell us about one of your biggest deals that you've worked on at MMJ, how they came about and just any key learnings from those.
Sure. I think a standout deal for me would be, was actually in 2023, the sale of 406 Collins Street. So a very prominent Collins Street. Yeah, Collins Street address. It was a 12-storey commercial building in the heart of the city, sold for around 30 mil, which was the first freestanding building sale for that year in Melbourne. So it was a pretty important transaction for the Melbourne market. What kind of makes this property quite interesting is the story behind it. My client actually purchased that property in 2015. It was from a self-managed owner. It had very high vacancy. It was over 15% vacant.
Wow.
And it had, it was the Atlas building. It's a very historical building.
Yeah.
It had good bones, but it really needed some strategic thought around how to fill those spaces and obviously then impact the value of the property. So we did things like, full strip outs of floors, manage that process. We helped the landlord to put in a end of trip facility downstairs in the basement, things like that to bring that property up into the market that it needed to be on for Collins Street, I think. And definitely asset management across the board made a key difference in how that property then came across to the market when it came back on the market in 2023. We really were able to secure a fantastic result because of the fact that we were able to supply information at a drop of a hat. This is when the air conditioning was last replaced. This is when the fire services were last done. Due diligence is quite an in-depth process, and if you can't supply that information, it can really impact the value. So whilst my involvement as managing director and as an asset manager was probably not as much as, say, for example, Joel Wald, who was the sales agent on that campaign along with Cushman & Wakefield. But he led that campaign with such strength, and the fact that we were then able to eventually sell it to an international investor was a great result.
I mean, on that deal, what's really fascinating is you're now showcasing the difference as well between asset and land-based value in isolation to management and value add strategies that can change a complete outcome.
Yeah.
And also I find that this is a big issue for those who don't understand the importance of the agent's impact on the campaign. We know when we're deal making, speed of due diligence, depth and clarity in answers, full insight versus partial insight. That's the difference between us going into a client discussion and going, yeah, we're confident about this asset, or we're not.
Yeah.
And so if we're confident on an asset, when we're speaking to a buyer, we can comfortably tick off the why, the reasons, the in-depth, and that has a big part to do not just with our skills, but your skills.
Yeah.
So that collaboration is important, but also the agents that don't do that, they're losing a lot of deals and genuine buyer interest. Remember, when you're talking 30 plus mil, we're not having, mate down the road just going,
Yeah.
so what's this going for?
Exactly right. 100%.
Every inquiry is legit. So
Yeah.
your speed comment is so true. But tell me about this. On that deal, firstly, it's the first in so long on that strip. Second, it's a premium strip in the point that Collins Street, if you don't get it right, you can see assets that are just a bit, not quite there, and then assets that are totally there and they just sell for wild differences.
Yeah.
Then Melbourne on top of that, you just come out of post-COVID.
Yes.
It's been rough. How does this get to the other side? What made this really go, we made this happen? What were the things that came out the other side?
Look, I think it was obviously when it comes down to campaign, when you're dealing with a smaller boutique agency, they don't think inside the box. We think outside of the box. We do things out of the ordinary to approach buyers. Whereas I think, in a bigger agency, it's a bit more of a cookie cutter approach. So things like approaching buyers directly, approaching international communication tools directly, and making sure that the asset is positioned really well in a way that it's got, now only 5% vacancy as opposed to 15, 20.
Yeah.
Obviously, the value comes from the yield at the end of the day, but also the fact that it was also presenting more modern. It had been repositioned. And I think thinking about that when you're going to be putting a $20-30 million property onto the market, you've got to think about that positioning and how it's going to present not only to local buyers but international buyers.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where it all kind of came into play there.
You know, I kind of think that the large-scale commercial deals and that asset transformation you're talking about is very similar to like the world of investment banking in a way. Like they're acquiring a company, but without the acquisition, you don't need to make that. You're the supporting partner in the middle. Like they're acquiring a company that isn't showing all the key line items that it should across the way they lead their team, the way the shop front is, or the restaurant, or the cafe, or any type of business. But then that little transformation in between, the repositioning, the lease structure, the vacancy length, the type of tenants you have in there, the land and the asset's the same. But just the repositioning is the difference between someone going too risky, I don't want to be a part of it, I don't want to speak to someone, versus okay, this still makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the beauty of commercial, not just in that deal, but like anywhere, is that yes, the land, the location, the industry are parts that are important to the deal, very important, but there's a lot more controllables when you get your hands dirty in commercial versus the house is a house in the street, that market is what's happening there. And yeah, sure, you can renovate and things like that, but you can't use the purposes of what the asset has or the tenant has in so many different ways in residential where you can in commercial. Loving the show and keen to invest? Well, book your free discovery call and we'll actually walk you through how to build a high growth portfolio without all the guesswork. Just jump onto the link in the show notes or visit investorkit.com.au to book your discovery call. And now let's get back into the show. I want to touch on Melbourne a bit deeper now, though, which is not just that asset, but where you're seeing value in Melbourne. Whether it be types of industries or certain location patches or tenant types that are like gone. Like this is like picking up really quickly. Where's value for you?
Well, I think to kind of examine value, you kind of want to have a look at the market. So I think from an industrial perspective, I mean, if I had money to spend right now, that is where I would be putting it. Industrial as an asset is still performing really well. Vacancy is tight. Yields are strong. And just from just purely the nuts and bolts of an industrial property, it is a simple asset from an investment perspective. You could typically get a tenant who's got a 10 plus 10 year lease, fixed increases, fully net lease, not subject to the Retail Leases Act, able to on-charge land tax, just simple and profitable. So that would probably be where I would, slap some cash down if I had some. But where I think there is some opportunities in the Melbourne market at the moment is in the office and retail sector, because they are so significantly underperforming currently. So from an office standpoint, we're seeing vacancy of about 12+% in CBD. There is significant incentives being awarded in the Melbourne market.
What sort of percentages?
We are seeing as high as 75% in the CBD.
Massive.
Yeah.
For big leases, like 5-10 year leases?
Yeah, for decent leases.
But 75%?
Yeah. A lot of them, when they're at that level there, I would say that they're probably a shorter term because the focus is to cover their outgoings.
Right.
Get somebody in to just cover their outgoings. That is because there is a significant amount of space available.
Yeah. And if I'm not mistaken, are a lot of those Melbourne offices in today's world, 2025, some of them are trading at similar prices to 2015 to 2018.
Yeah,
not all, but some of them are.
Not a lot of uplift in rents either.
Yeah.
So you kind of think about it like that, and then we're seeing properties being sold at 50% of book value. So where I think there is value in that, however, is the fact that you could pick up an absolute bargain. And I know, well, I'd like to say I know for a fact, but I do feel that the only way is up from here. We are seeing a greater return to office-based workplace. People are being encouraged back into the office, so that will start to encourage higher use of their offices, and therefore potentially a requirement to increase their space. From a real estate perspective, I mean, even when people are getting out of their lease, then we still have transactions happening. There's larger companies that are moving to smaller companies. There's smaller spaces, and then this bracket here is moving into a smaller space. So there's always things happening, and there's always space available. But where I see that there could be value is the fact that there's an opportunity to get into the market. Almost, if you looked at it from a share perspective, get in at the bottom of the market and enjoy the growth. So I do think that there's an opportunity there. And similarly, from a retail perspective, again, we've got quite a bit of vacancy in some of the key strips of retail. There are some strips of retail that are just performing fantastically. Brighton in Melbourne, no matter what is going on anywhere else in the market, still going well. But again, where I see this, value is that there's probably an opportunity to kind of get into the market, and retail is improving as well. We're seeing some positive sentiment in the market.
What are the types of buyers that you're seeing at the moment purchasing? Like you mentioned, the office market's still got relatively high vacancy.
Yep.
And there's really good opportunity to buy in the office market at the moment. Are you seeing more owner-occupiers purchase there? Are you seeing any investors at all taking a stab?
We still see investors definitely coming into the market. They're just more cautious, I think. Yeah. And where I think, again, there's an opportunity is that the caution is leading deals to take a really long time. So anybody who's willing to come in with confidence can snap up something really nicely. From a retail perspective as well, we're still seeing a lot of investors coming into the market. From an office standpoint, the strata opportunities would probably be more the owner-occupiers.
Got you.
Yeah.
Got you. Let's talk about the new CIPT tax that's been implemented by Victoria. Mm-hmm. What is CIPT in your view, and is it impacting the market at the moment?
Okay, so it's a commercial and industrial property tax that the government has brought in to almost take over stamp duty. The usual scenario would be that when you purchase a property, you pay a very large chunk of stamp duty, and then you're obviously wearing that large capital outlay. CIPT coming in basically switches that over to being a 1% additional tax within the SRO, so within the land tax kind of realm, an additional tax that's just paid yearly in addition to your land tax. So where there is an opportunity for any investors coming into the market is whereby there's been a property that's already been sold since July last year. July 2024 was the cutoff, so that would be the date that you would still pay stamp duty for any sale after that date, and then the time clock starts basically from the date of that sale. 10 years after that point, CIPT comes in. So if I could give an example, say you were to purchase a property today for, let's say $3.5 million, you would pay $198,000 circa in stamp duty. And then in 10 years' time, in May 2035. There we go.
Feels scary just imagining.
I know.
2030s.
I was like, gosh, surely not. But from May 2035, you'd be paying an additional circa $17,500. That's in today's dollars, obviously, based on the site value of a $3.5 million, kind of sitting at about 1.7. You would start to pay that 1% in 2035. But whereas if you were to purchase a property today that was maybe sold in August last year for the same amount of price, you wouldn't be paying that $198,000 in stamp duty. And in fact, you wouldn't be paying anything until, if it was August last year, August 2034.
So the timing of the asset that's been sold and capturing it just after that sort of 2024 window will save people a lot of cash to enter into markets.
Yes.
But then that means now either the deposit's going further or they're left with more cash. Where it gets interesting is that this may bring in the property flipper in the commercial world 9.9 years later.
I know, right?
Do you know what I mean? So like, I get that it's a really smart model for fluctuation in transactions for a government revenue stream to change to like more stream based. That's always a smarter, if you're running a company, it's like, do you want to keep doing transactions each year or do you want recurring revenue, right? But the problem is like, you put 10-year time, remove this now after the state for sale, all these complexities, people are going to look for that way to shift it out just before.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to bring in some like, movement of supply here and there in the future. So that's really, really interesting. I mean, Allison, this episode's been amazing just to know more about your background. And so thank you for taking the time to spend that with us and just being able to share more. We can't wait to get you back in the show again, which will be very soon. And in terms of some of the biggest deals, I think lots of learnings for people there to understand the importance of asset management, repositioning, and how you can turn your commercial property to achieve greater success there from that right relationship and support. But where we're seeing value, this is giving Chris and I some good insights in Melbourne, as well as many of our listeners. So thank you again for today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Awesome.
Thank you.